Hello, disciples. Welcome to another episode of Imagine with Me. Today, I'm really excited to have with me the Reverend Dean Phelps, currently serving as a transitional regional minister in the Kentucky region, but also very much a technophile like myself. And today, we're going to talk about the new church-wide data system called ALEX. You may have seen information about it on the website and social media. But Dean has been with us from the beginning of thinking through this system, and we're so excited to have him with us today. Many of you know Dean, and I'm just going to let him say a little bit about his ministry, and we'll talk a little bit about what our hopes are for ALEX and why it's so important for the church right now. So, Dean, thanks for joining me today, and maybe you just want to share a little bit about your ministry, and we'll get our conversation going.
Sure. Terri, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this conversation. I am currently serving as the transitional regional minister for the disciples in Kentucky. This is not my first lap around this particular barn. I've also been the interim regional minister for the Central Rocky Mountain region and for the Christian Church in Oklahoma. Worked on regional staff in both Georgia and Indiana as well. And during this time in Kentucky, been blessed to work with a section of the Ohio disciples as well. I added it up. Again, a data geek is going to do these things. And I think I've served in regional ministry in some form or another to somewhere between 20 and 25% of the church.
Wow.
In addition to that, I'm second career in ministry. My first career was as a systems programmer and as a technical support manager. My undergraduate training is in music and mathematics. So, Dean the statistician comes out every now and then. I've also worked for Saran Systems, the company that has developed many of the systems that we use today. So get to bring that knowledge to my ministry as well. My colleagues often roll their eyes when I say much of the beauty of the world lies in calculus, but that's me. I still believe it.
Well, Dean, I think one of the reasons that you and I work so well together is that we do have similar profiles. I mean, I also spent my first career was in information technology and data warehousing. I didn't study music, but I've played the piano all my life, and so appreciate your music. And it uses the same side of the brain.
Yes.
Math and science and music and language also all use the same side of the brain. So I'm excited about ALEX. One of the things that I felt becoming the GMP that I was concerned about was the way we were doing the yearbook. And the necessity of having all that information. How do you think ALEX will help us and help congregations? What do you think are the main benefits of ALEX as we go forward?
Two things come immediately to mind. One is ALEX is going to really enhance the ability to collect that information. We've really been working to make it easier for congregations to report that information, for regions to have an understanding of that information. And we're having some growing pains with this first rollout, but that's typical of any new application. As we get more used to this, that will smooth out. The other piece that ALEX is going to bring, and where I kind of really get happy about it, in this early phase, is the number of times that I have needed to research something and I need history. And I have to go to that room in the regional office where we keep the yearbooks back to 1928 and pull one off the shelf and get the piece of data out of it that I need, and pull the next one off the shelf and get that, to be able to have one place where I can go to and see that history. Let that data begin to tell me a story. That's less labor. I can get to the story quicker without having to do all the manual work to compile the data. That's going to be a real blessing that this very first phase of ALEX is going to help us with.
Right. And you mentioned like the very first phase of ALEX, and I think that's important for people to remember. We're initially just replacing the previous process that people used to enter their yearbook data with ALEKS. What else is going to be important in this very first phase that you think congregations should be paying attention to?
It will be good to be able to look at that historical information. That's the piece that's going to be most important in this first phase. As I've looked at and worked with systems across the churches, I've seen how our data our data storage technology works. We're trying to pull data from these different sources that don't talk to each other and don't connect with each other. And so the effort to begin to bring that together. So I can see in the yearbook data trends like what the offerings have been, what attendance has been, what membership has been. If I want to correlate with that with who was serving as the minister, I can't do that right now. Or I can do it, but it's a very, very manual process to do that.
Right.
So as we begin to draw in some of these other data sources and start to consolidate and centralize, that's going to be extremely helpful.
Right. You've been working with a group of regional ministers who have been serving sort of as our focus group, kind of looking at the screens and the input screens and working with us as we've done training, asking the right questions so that things make sense. And the next phase that we'll be getting into is sort of that reporting capability that you've been talking about, really accessing a lot of that historical data. And I've been talking a lot about, the title of this series, Imagine with Me, and in our church having the courage to imagine who we have to be as new church in a new world. How do you think ALEKS or a system like this helps us begin to live into an understanding of covenantal church, congregations, regions, general church? How does ALEKS a tool for that kind of relationship?
To have access to good data, and I'm very big in talking about data in and of itself is a rather useless thing. Data as it sits in computer storage is just a series of magnetic impulses. Until we actually start to pull that out and look at it, does that data start to become information? Does that data start to tell us a story? Do we start to see how that data has a flow to it? That it came from somewhere and that it's going somewhere. So as we're able to let that data tell us a story, we're going to get a clearer picture. Who we are is a function of where we've come from. And where we've come from and who we are is what's going to let us imagine about where we can be, what God might be calling us to do next. Good information and good conversation around that information, to understand the context of it. I always remember my Greek instructor in seminary who said once a week, without context, nothing makes sense.
Yeah.
So to have that information and to have it in community where we can talk about it and understand the context, what does this mean? Where might we be able to go next? What sparks up out of here that excites us, that lights that fire for us?
Right. I think it's a great way to the context of making sense. You've mentioned, the story that the data tells us. In my former line of work in data warehousing, there's a concept called data mining, right? And sometimes people will say, well, what are your questions? And sometimes you just need to have the information there so that trends will sort of bubble up. And as you slice and dice and turn it this way and ask different kinds of questions, those trends, that story does begin to emerge. One of the questions that we're always looking at are, we hear, trends about just Protestant denominations, period. It's been hard for us to be able to look at our data in this way and ask these questions to see if if the anecdotal stories that we are hearing are really borne out, by the evidence. And I think that's one of the most important things from where I sit, is that to have this church-wide view I mean, the congregations will have their own information, some financial history from Treasury Services that will be loaded so they can look at their giving over a period of time. Regional ministers will be able to see congregational data and certain elements of that rolled up. And those of us at the general level will be able to have a church-wide understanding. And I think that's so important. As we think about where we must go, there will be flags in this data, I think, and a story that will help us to think about it. One of the things that I think is really important is how the church uses technology. Would you say a little bit from where you sit about the importance of this kind of technology? There are different systems that the regional ministers use, but why should we even care about this technology? I mean, overall.
Some of it is a question of keeping pace. I get a little bit allergic, and generally ask the question when somebody uses the word technology and just lets it sit by itself.
Yeah.
What technology are we talking about? If I need to drive a nail, the technology I'm going to choose is a hammer.
Right.
But this kind of computing technology, we are able to store vast amounts of, we were limited physically by the amount of data we used to be able to store. Well, that storage technology, very inexpensively, we can store swaths of data. As we start to build out the history from the yearbook, where we store it's not going to be an issue. Communication technology has made it possible for us to access this data quicker. That has an upside and a downside, in that if I can do things quickly, am I still going to be attentive to the need to stop, come back to the context and stop and let the data and information prompt me to ask questions? But to be able to have the access that we can have now is going to be very important, especially moving forward. We still live in a world of speed, blur, and flux, and to be able to get at information quickly is going to be important. I remember, working early on in regional ministry, helping churches with strategic plans. And it wasn't long before I realized that a lot of those plans, we really couldn't think much further out than 6 months. And we needed to write a lot of it in pencil. We always needed to be circling around and asking, okay, how's the environment? How's the context changed? What's changing around us, and how can we respond to that? And our information has to be able to help us do that. It's got to keep pace with that speed. Yeah.
As I've been having conversations with my peers and other Protestant denominations, and in developing Alex, we've talked to people in the United Church of Christ, Presbyterian Church, Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, having conversations with our new full communion partners, the United Church of Canada, who have, and all of these denominations. I'm sitting there as again, a former IT professional, just watering at the mouth over the kinds of infrastructure that these denominations have. And one of my hopes is that we'll get to the point where disciples aren't so far behind the curve, because we actually are now, to be truthful. We really are, in terms of what other denominations are doing. And given what the technology, the data technology, the web technology can allow us to do, that's certainly one of my hopes. I know that we have congregations who may be concerned because the people who normally do their yearbook input are not used to, maybe they're used to filling out a form, but they're not used to dealing with a system like Alex. And we want to assure people that, our office and the OGMP, Sherilyn Williams and others, we're there to, answer questions, et cetera, and we'll give that information. From where you sit, what do you see that terrain in terms of acceptance of this new technology? I hear from younger disciples who are really excited, younger pastors who are excited that this is happening. And how can we help keep everybody moving forward, do you think?
I think a lot of it is let's tell the stories of the places where this has been embraced, and tell that from across the life of the church. One of the things that we're running up against is inequity of access.
Mm-hmm.
We have churches where access to this kind of communication technology is far removed from what other congregations have access to. And I think, this was a question that came up while I was in the Central Rocky Mountain region. What can we as a church do to help level that playing field a little bit? I think that's something that's a question we can start asking ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sharing those success stories. And I think especially, I would say, it's probably not just younger folks that are excited about this.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest, I don't consider myself a younger folk anymore. And I'm a little bit excited about it. And I think kind of across the generations of the church, we're seeing that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And this is another opportunity where I think having access to this information, if we keep in mind the covenant relationship that we have.
Mm-hmm.
One of my laments has been the ways we've kind of lost sight of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And if technology like this can help us regain that, that's going to be very important to us moving forward.
Absolutely. I still consider myself a younger person, Dean.
Okay.
But no, but I happened to be in a conversation with clergy under 40 in one of our regions, and was giving them an update. And this was before the holidays, was giving them an update on ALEX. And it was just around the time we were inviting people to get their user IDs and sign in and start learning the system. And because I was with that group of younger people, as I was talking about it, one of them actually got the email that came from Sherilyn. And so that was that moment for me was sort of emblematic of what a particular generation, it's like, this is the kind of thing that we need to be doing. Since we're imagining in the world of data information and data technology, where do you hope we can go with this technology? What are the possibilities that you see once we lay this foundation with the very first phase of ALEX?
One of the things that ALEX is introducing to us, and you talked about how we're kind of behind the curve in relation to some of our colleagues and some of our fellow mainline denominations. Again, it's a question of access. Right now, for much of the work that I need to do with information, I need to be sitting in front of this notebook computer that I'm sitting in front of now. I really need to be able to just look it up on my phone.
Right.
We need to continue to develop this technology in a way that's platform independent.
Right.
So that wherever I am, I have this access. It's hard for me to predict the future, but again, to be able to let the data tell us a story, and to let the data remind us. There was a time when we had quite a fascination with demographic reports, and those are fine as long as we remember that every number in that report represents a person. This is somebody that I might meet at the grocery store or the coffee shop.
Right.
And to see, okay, well, given this context, if this church is in Louisville, Kentucky, or Monte Vista, Colorado, what's the context? What might that person be worried about? How can this data start to inform those conversations? I think is a nice future vision for this.
And from my standpoint, I'll take a minute here as we wrap up to talk about some of the things I've always envisioned with this. Is a data warehouse is really a place where you have different types of data accessible to you, and you're able to make correlations among them. So, we have a ministerial directory. one of our sister denominations has sort of like a clergy profile application, sort of like a clergy LinkedIn, where you can, apart from search and call, right, you might be able to keep some information available. I would love as GMP to have a better profile on lay people as well, that are serving on committees, and a centralized place to be able to identify, gee, where are the people who have these particular skill sets, this particular background. And of course, that's a voluntary kind of thing, but having this kind of data environment begins to allow you to access multiple sources of data and correlate them, and use them as you'd like, in addition to just, some ad hoc querying and just asking questions. And hopefully improving overall, the way we use data, and allowing it, because we need it to tell us certain things. That's why we even have a yearbook. And so I think moving into this next phase is going to be really exciting. Maybe one day we'll have a voice-driven system, and somebody will say Alex instead of Alexa, right? So in case people haven't gotten the connection with Alex, it's a short for Alexander Campbell. That's the reference that we're making there. So Dean, I just want to thank you not only for this conversation today, but for your support and investment of time and energy and leadership that you've given, along with several other regional ministers who've been really working with us. And I'm looking forward to how people will experience Alex. To get more information about Alex, you can go to disciples.org/Alex, or you can send an email to alex@disciples.org. And Sherilyn Williams, who is our project lead on this project, will be able to help you with any questions that you may have. The deadline for submitting your yearbook data is coming up on March 15th. And we really want to be sure that everyone has the ability to use this new tool to enter their yearbook data this year, as we begin to imagine all the ways in which we can use this data. So if you haven't heard of Alex and your congregation hasn't yet started, please write to alex@disciples.org so we can get you included. We are here to work with. If you're afraid and like, I'm not sure how I would do this, send an email to alex@disciples.org, and one of our staff will be happy to step in and help you. So thank you so much, Dean, once again. And disciples, let's continue to imagine together who we must be as a new church for this amazingly new world that we're now living in. God bless you, and remember that God loves you, and so do I.